First things first, you want to put on your gloves. Your gloves are going to ensure that no particles or contaminants from your hands are going to be transferred into your fruiting blocks. Since you want this to be as clean as possible, I recommend that you turn on your fan for at least 20 minutes before you start working. And I would make sure you take a shower and you don't touch any pets before you start working in your space. Here we have maitake spawn, millet to be more specific, the best grain in my opinion. Here we have our bottle of isopropyl alcohol. This is what we use to disinfect. Now we have our pair of scissors. I'll be using this to cut open our spawn bag. A 1/2 measuring cup. That's how much spawn I'll be using per bag. A permanent marker to label and date our bags, and then paper towels to clean up any mess that we have. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to get my isopropyl alcohol and spray my scissors down and then leave them in front of the fan so the fan dries them off. Now I'm going to spray that same isopropyl alcohol onto my hands and make sure I rub it in nice and good. Same thing with my measuring cup. I want to make sure it's nice and sterile. Rub it all in, make sure it dries. If the isopropyl alcohol does not dry, it's not going to do its job in disinfecting. Now that our hands are nice and clean, what we want to do is grab our spawn bag and start to break it up. We don't want any big pieces or large clumps, so you want to keep working the bag until you have nice fine particles. Don't be too rough with the bag because you ideally don't want it to burst. Then you'll have a big mess, especially with millet. If millet spills, it tends to go everywhere since it's such a small grain, which is one of the cons. Definitely will make a mess. But one of the many pros is that since it's so small, it has a lot of points of inoculation, so it's going to grow a lot faster than, let's say, oats or rye berries that are naturally larger grains. So make sure you have all the small pieces in there. If there's little chunks, it's not going to be too big of a deal, but I try to make sure that it's as fine as possible. Now that our spawn is nicely broken up, we could start moving our sterilized blocks onto the table and we can start inoculating. Now you want to pick up your scissors to cut open your spawn bag. You have two options on doing this. You can cut open a corner and then pour the spawn into each bag, although that can make a mess if you have any clumps. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the whole top of the bag off so I have easy access with my measuring cup. Now that we have our blocks on the table, let's start by opening them up. Some blocks can be a little bit harder than others to open up, like this first one, just because during the sterilization process, the heat creates a nice seal, which is also great because if you can't inoculate your blocks the day after cooking them, you don't have to worry too much since the bag is nice and sealed and you won't have any contaminants in there. Although that doesn't mean to store your blocks in a dirty place. Try to keep it as clean as possible. Now that they're all open, we're going to get our measuring cup and we're going to scoop a 1/2 cup worth of spawn into each bag. You could do more, you could do less. I feel like this is a good amount of spawn, and it also depends how many blocks you decide to inoculate. That's going to really dictate how much spawn you use and how fast you want them to grow. More spawn, they're going to grow faster. Less spawn, they're going to grow slower. Now that the spawn is added in the bags, we're going to get our heat sealer and we're going to seal these bags. I have to seal my bags twice because my heat sealer is a little too short to do my entire bag. Now I could gusset fold and seal, but personally I don't really like the gusset fold. I like the flat fold like you see now. And if you're not entirely sure what gussets are, they're the sides of the bags that you can fold into each other. Now, if you don't have a heat sealer, you could always use clips or zip ties in order to seal your bags, but I would only recommend those for fast-growing species like oyster mushrooms. Slower-growing mushrooms like lion's mane, maitake, chestnut, shiitake aren't going to take to that method of sealing the greatest because they need a lot more time than the oyster mushrooms, and they're not as vigorous as oyster mushrooms. There's been plenty of times where my oyster mushrooms have grown in neglect, or they just completely outcompeted any molds that were in their grow block. So just keep that in mind. A lot of mushroom work is very repetitive, a lot of the same actions over and over again, so allow me to speed up this clip so you don't have to watch the same actions over and over again. Next, we want to start shaking our bags. So we want to make sure all of our spawn is dispersed throughout the substrate. All of our spawn right now is going to be on the top of the bag, and you really want to work with the substrate to try to get all the millet or whatever spawn you're using to the bottom of the bag. This is going to make sure that it has even growth and healthy growth. You want to make sure you get all those clumps out so the block is nice and aerated. Another thing that I can't recommend enough is when you're inoculating your bags and you go to seal them, make sure your bags have air in them. If they don't have air in them, when you go to mix your bags, you're gonna have one heck of a struggle fest trying to mix your bags. It's not fun when there's no air in there. You know, it doesn't really want to move. It's very arduous, just makes your life a lot harder. So if anything, I can recommend definitely keep some air on the top of the bag. You will thank me later. Another thing too, when I go to label my bags, I typically use the Latin name. So in this case, I used GF for Graphola frondosa, and then I put the date on right after that, so I can keep track of when these bags were inoculated and when I can expect to put them in the fruiting room. If I sound a little bit under the weather, it's because as I'm editing this video, I got sick, but I'm trying to get this video out to you guys. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and share. It is much appreciated. And if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please put them in the comment section down below. It's the Mushroom Sage, and I'll see you in the next video.